Amen. Amen. Okay, so we are continuing ahead now. And last week we took the time and went over the 70 weeks of Daniel in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. And I just want to say one final thought about that. And especially because of the election we've just had, and I just want to say it this way. God is concerned about secular government. And the Bible is filled with secular governments and how their influence impacts God's people. Going back to Egypt, killing the babies of the Israelites. But you think about the 70 weeks of Daniel. Just think about that. What started the 70-week timeline? What began the clock of that? It was when a king gave the edict to rebuild the walls in the streets of Jerusalem, a secular king. That started the 70 weeks. And then in the middle of that period of time, then there was the 69 weeks, and then there was the gap. What happened in the gap? The Messiah, the Prince, was what? Cut off, crucified. Who did that? A secular government, Rome. Of course, with the Jewish people's consent, but really the world, Jew and Gentile. So there's secular government involved in that. Then what starts the timeline of the last week, the 70th week, the tribulation time? What starts that timeline? The signing of a peace treaty by an antichrist, a secular ruler, and having an impact and an influence in the world. And so God is even in control. As it says, what? The heart of the king is in his hand. So as we begin tonight, and we're going to really kind of continue now into our next step after the rapture, there will be that signing of the peace treaty and then the tribulation. So we want to really focus in on the tribulation tonight. And we want to go to Revelation chapter 6. Now, there's two main purposes. You might want to jot this down somewhere. There's two main reasons for the tribulation. Number one, it is a judgment on the unbelieving Gentile nations. It will bring a great and severe judgment to the earth dwellers who are anti-God, anti-Christ, following the Antichrist, and a part of that globalist. And that's what it is. It is the globalist Babylonian kingdom. And the second purpose is it is for the salvation of Israel. God is going to save those 144,000 Jews. They are going to evangelize the world, and all of Israel will be saved. And God is going to fulfill his promises that Israel will be saved, believe in Messiah. They will enter into the millennial kingdom at the conclusion of the tribulation. So those are the two main purposes, I believe, of the tribulation. The judgment of the Gentile nations. The judgment of the Gentile nations, the salvation of Israel. Now, in Revelation chapter 6, we have the six seals. Now, remember, that book in chapter 5 that no one could open. What is that book? What is that seven-sealed book? Many people believe it's the title deed of the universe. And no one could take it, because to take that book would be to unloose the seals, to bring the judgment, because who's worthy to bring judgment? God. And who can restore a world under the curse of sin and the domination of Satan and reclaim it back? So really, that book, I believe, is the title deed of the universe, whereby Jesus Christ is going to reclaim the earth, ultimately remove the curse of sin, and destroy and defeat Satan, so that he will be cast into the lake of fire at the end when it's all open. Now, that book, it had seven seals, but the seventh seal opened what? the seven trumpets. And it's not absolutely stated, but I believe it's implied that the seventh trumpet will then lead to a final series of judgments of the vials, the seven vials. But so in this book are these three series of judgments. So that gets us to this right here. Okay, so this first chart is really just an overview of future events. There's the rapture, the 7-year period of tribulation, and this is the blue I'm looking at, and then there'll be a 1,000-year millennial kingdom. So in the 7-year tribulation, we've talked about this, two parts to it, the beginning of sorrows, the first 3.5 years, then the great tribulation, the second 3.5 years. That will lead to the salvation of many Gentiles and many martyrs, but the salvation of Israel, the judgment of the Gentile nations. Christ will come back at the end of this 7-year period and then establish his kingdom on the earth. That's just a quick overview. Now, but we want to go, though, into the tribulation time. And there's a few different ways that people look at these series of judgments. And I'm going to tell you what my view is first, okay? This is what my view is. And you don't, this is something where we can agree to disagree, definitely. This is not like rock solid. This is prophecy. This is us doing the best we can to figure things out, okay? But I do have I'm going to share with you what I believe, and I believe I'm right, you know, but other people don't, some people don't believe I'm right, okay? So I'm just putting it out there. So I'm going to share two views about these three series of judgments, the seals, trumpets, and vials. Now, my view is that these judgments overlap. In other words, they're not completely chronological. In other words, it's not like the seals are going to be opened and that happens, and then the trumpets happen next, and then the vials happen next. That is a view, and I have that one next, but my view is that the seal judgments in chapter 6 overview the entire 7-year period of tribulation. The trumpets probably happen more toward the beginning, but what I'm going to also present is that it seems that at the end of each series of judgments, John brings us right to the brink of the coming of Jesus Christ. So I think there's like, it's not like it's like this. It's not, I don't believe it's successive all the way. It's more like this. It's more like interlocking. So these chapters in Revelation, and I think I can prove this one pretty well. There's a lot of interlocking things going on. In other words, one chapter finishes, it's not like then the next chapter happens. And I'll show you, they go together, and he's giving you different features of the tribulation. I would say it this way. I believe that Revelation chapters 6 through 19 give you features of the tribulation. It's all about the tribulation, and it's more interlocking. That's my kind of take on it. Okay. So you have the seals in chapter 6, that overview, the 7 years, bringing us right to the brink of the coming of the Lord. Then he's like, wait, I want to tell you more about the tribulation. And he tells you about the 144,000 being saved. And he tells you about the trumpets, and he tells you about the persecution of Israel, and he tells you about the Antichrist in chapter 13 and the false prophet in chapter 13. So it's all kind of interlocking. And then the trumpets, and then the vials, and then of course the last vial brings you right to the brink of the coming of the Lord. So I think this is interesting, and I'm fascinated with it. And I'm going to show you the verses. But right at the end of the seal judgments in chapter 6, it's like you're right at the brink of the coming of the Lord. And something happens that indicates the Lord is going to come back at any second. It's like he's right there. But he doesn't come yet. And then the same thing with the trumpet, the seventh trumpet. It's like right at the brink of the coming of the Lord. You're like, okay, he's going to come right now. Nope, not yet. Wait, you got to wait. And then the seals happen, and then the vials happen, and then again, right at the brink of the coming of the Lord. But he still doesn't come right at the end of the vials. In chapter 17, he talks about mystery religious Babylon, commercial Babylon in 17 and 18. So he's always giving you like, it's like, he's like, wait, I got to tell you more about what's going on during the tribulation. And then finally in chapter 19, boom, he comes. Okay. So I view these chapters as like interlocking. Now there's others though, who see them that these judgments happen in succession. So those are two legitimate views. That the seals happen, like our author right here. This is his view that the let's see. Okay, look on page 542. He talks about this very question we're talking about. Page 542, if you can go there. And I'll read it. It's if you see on page 542, it says the judgments of the seals, trumpets, and bowls. So he's talking about these three series of judgments, and he's talking about the sequence under that. So Revelation 6 through 19 describes the tribulation in detail. Three series of judgments. The first series is related to the opening of the seals, the second to the blowing of trumpets, the third to the pouring of the contents of the bowls. And here's this question. Do these three series of judgments follow each other in succession, or do the trumpets and bowls recapitulate the judgments of the seals with greater intensity? In other words, do the trumpet and bowl judgments follow the seals as different and distinct judgments, or do they picture the same judgments? I believe the three series follow one another in chronological sequence, and there is no recapitulation. Okay, so that's his view. So I wrote it. I wrote here, I disagree. That's what I wrote. So, you don't have to agree with everything. Okay, so read with discernment and study it out yourself. Okay, so either way, however, so he says either way. So that's kind of what I'm saying as well. I mean, he's like saying I might be wrong, and I'm saying I might be wrong too, on this. But I've studied it out and came to a conclusion. Either way, however, the seal judgments are the first judgments in the tribulation days and will probably occur during the first year of that period. So obviously, when the seals are first open, it's the beginning, So there is sequence. I think the first four, there's sequence to them, but then there's like I said, recapitulation. Okay, so any questions about that? Do you understand what we're saying? Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so here's the notes now. The six seals in Revelation 6 give an entire overview of the 7-year period of tribulation. So that's what I'm teaching. Each of these seals can be cross-referenced to the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24, which is Jesus' teaching on the signs of his coming and of the end of the world. So one of my main reasons why I do believe that Revelation 6 is an overview of the entire 7-year period of tribulation is because it follows what Jesus taught in Matthew 24, which was the whole tribulation. Every feature in Revelation 6 can be cross-referenced to Matthew 24, right up to the coming of the Lord. So that's why I believe a main reasons why I do believe that these judgments, that the seal judgments are overview it. Okay, so Revelation gives these three series of judgments, seals, 7 seals opening a scroll. The 7th seal leads to the 7th trumpet. The 7 trumpets are the 7th seal, and the 7 vials are then poured out. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to look at the seal, and then I've asked someone to read from Matthew 24. So you could go to Matthew 24 and go to Revelation 6. And I just want us to see the cross-referencing between the seals and the Olivet Discourse and an overview of the entire tribulation time. Okay, so the first seal, and why don't I'll have you guys read it here. So Justin, can you please read Revelation chapter 6 and verses 1 and 2? Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 and 2.
Saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts, saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow and crown, and the crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer.
Okay, so does that not fit? Okay, the beginning of the tribulation is what? Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. What happens? It's Antichrist signs a peace treaty. So here's a rider on a white horse. That's a picture of what? Peace. And it also goes with 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. That's another cross reference. When they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction. But it begins with peace. So here's the rider on the white horse. This is the Antichrist. Okay, so let me just read the statement here, and then we'll read the Matthew 24. Charlie will read that in just a moment. The first seal is a rider upon a white horse. This is not Christ, but the Antichrist. Christ comes clearly in Revelation 19. You'll be surprised. Some people think this is Christ. Okay, here's the principle of the book of Revelation. When Jesus comes, you'll know it. If you have any doubt about it, it's not Jesus. Okay, that's my understanding of it. Okay, so this can't be Jesus. Why? Because he's opening the seal, and this is the pouring out of wrath. By the way, that goes against the pre-wrath theory that says the wrath is just at the end of the tribulation. The wrath is when the Lamb opens the seals, beginning with the first one. Even though it seems like peace, it's going to lead to great wrath and destruction. So here, the Antichrist is not only against the true Messiah. So when you think of anti, somebody against, but is seen as bringing peace instead of the Lord Jesus Christ. So he's anti in the sense of, instead of Christ, people are following the Antichrist. It's like people would rather have Barabbas than Jesus. That's the world we're in. They'd rather have an Antichrist than Christ. Okay, so this is the seal of deception. And Charlie can now, let's read the cross-reference Matthew 24, verses 4 and 5. Charlie, if you could read that, please.
And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many.
Okay, so the Lord does say many, and John said there are many antichrists in the world, but then there is one Antichrist. And so this is the Antichrist of all antichrists. Okay, so the second seal is the rider on the red horse. And you could say this is the seal of devastation or war. It's red. The rider on the red horse pictures the Antichrist maintaining his hold on power by war and much bloodshed. So he comes to power without war, but to keep the power, there will be war. And look, please, in Revelation and chapter number 6. And Bailey, may I have you please read verses 3 and 4?
Second seal, I heard the second beast say, Come and see. And there went out another horse that was red. Power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great power.
Okay, so he exercises his power through war and intimidation, and there's great bloodshed. And so, Vinicius, could you please read Matthew chapter 24 and verse 6? And this is the cross reference now to the rider on the red horse, which was war and bloodshed. Matthew 24, verse 6.
Yes, Pastor. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet.
We're here. There's war in the world and even rumors of wars. Always. But it's going to be escalated. I mean, even this weekend, there were rumors of wars that Zelensky was going to send long-range ballistic missiles into Russia that we had given them, escalating this conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And who knows what would happen if they did that, how Putin would respond. Who knows? It's just, but there's a war there and rumors of even worse wars. But that's what's going to be like, even to a greater extent during the tribulation time. Okay, so the third seal, and can I get you please, Jeannie, if you could please read Revelation chapter 6, verses 5 and 6.
And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on it had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the fourth beast saying, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine.
Okay. And so they say that this is the, of course, the black horse, and it deals with dearth or famine. There will be great famine. War often brings other problems with it, pestilence and famine. But the balances speak of them, weighing the food, and they're measuring the wheat and the barley, which were common man's food. But for it now, a penny might not seem like a lot, but that's like a day's wage for a little bit of wheat or barley. So it's really, this is basically saying that they're weighing it out, meaning that it's a limited supply. And so there's a limited food supply for the basic necessities for the common people. But he says, hurt not the oil and wine, which would be more looked upon as luxury type items for the wealthy. And there was no shortage of that. So in other words, war and famine are going to affect who? The common people. But the rich always seem to actually profit off of it. War, that's why they love war. That's why the military industrial complex, even in our own nation, and that's why our politicians push war, because they get rich on it. And that's what's going to happen during the tribulation time. So the black horse is a horse of famine. The balance speaks of a rationing of food. A bit of wheat for one man will cost a day's wage. Hurt not the oil and wine. I have something here for Ryrie. I don't know what. I wrote down Ryrie, page 543. So I wrote it down. Oh, okay. So what I just said, Ryrie has this also in the Ryrie book. If you look at page 543, and Esther, do you have that? It's kind of right before the fourth seal judgment. Do you see where it says the fourth? Do you see where it says like 4 lines above that? However, right there.
However, there is an ironic twist to this famine. Oil and wine, the very things a majority of people cannot afford, will not be in short supply. The scarcity of basic food and the availability of luxury items will taunt the common people in their impoverished state.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I agree with Ryrie on that one. Now, the cross reference here, Jacob, if you could read, please, for us, Matthew chapter 24 and verse 7. If you could please read Matthew 24, verse 7, Jacob.
Matthew 24, verse 7. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes, in divers places.
Okay, so there it goes. There's going to be famines. And that's really this black horse. It's the black horse of famine. And this next verse, this next seal also relates to that verse. So we don't have to read another cross reference or from Matthew 24. So Matthew 24:7 goes with both the third and the fourth seals. The rider on the black horse and then the rider on the pale horse, which speaks of death and unspeakable tragedy. So, Liz, can I ask you please to read Revelation chapter 6. If we could read now, Revelation chapter 6, verses 7 and 8, please.
Revelation 6, verses 7 and 8. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, Come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death. And hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beast of the earth.
Okay. The fourth part of the earth will be killed. Now, I kind of laughed in my notes. It says 1/4 of the world's population will die. In a world of 6 billion, that is 1.5 billion people. Well, my notes are old. I mean, they're about like, that's maybe 4 or 5 years old. So in just 4 or 5 years, maybe a little longer, I don't know. But you know how many people are in the world today? 8. We're up to 8 billion people. So you might want to correct that 6 billion, put 8, and a quarter of that is 2 billion people. And who knows when the Lord comes, how many billions will be here. So an unspeakable tragedy, so many people dying. And it says that they're going to die with sword, with hunger, with beasts. And also in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 7, that verse that Jacob read, what did that say? It said, there will be famines and what? Pestilences. That's like plagues. That's like viruses spread about the world. And we know that we know this could happen. They could manufacture a virus that would kill millions and millions of people. Let's see, maybe they already did that. And that wasn't even that pathogenic of a virus. If it was, they could manufacture even a more deadly virus. Who knows what one nation would do to another to destroy life? So we're living in dangerous times. And I'm going to throw this out also because there's an interesting word in the book of Revelation. It's called pharmakia. And with pestilences, what do you use to battle the viruses and the pestilence? Pharmakia. And the ones who are making these pharmakia are the richest men in the world. Revelation chapter 18, verse 23. The rich men of the earth are the big merchants of the world are making their money through pharmakia. And I believe that we got a taste of that with COVID, with Bill Gates and others making so much money trying to force the vaccine upon everyone. One of the best moves in my life. Should I say it?
No.
Oh, okay. Huh? Don't say that I didn't take it. Okay. Oh yeah, they might take me off of YouTube now. They took my other sermon off of YouTube when I preached about that. Okay, so let's move on from that. Okay, so we have death, and now we have the seal of martyrdom. Now, martyrdom is a major feature of the tribulation. So when we see in this passage and in Revelation, and can I get Vinicius, could you please read in verses, Revelation chapter 6, verse 9 through 11?
Yes, Pastor. Sorry, I'm pulling it up.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay. Revelation 6. You said 6 through 9?
9, Revelation chapter 6, verses 9 through 11.
9 through 11. Sorry. Okay. 9 through 11 reads, And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them. And it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled.
Okay, so now earlier I said that, these chapters interlock and overlap. I just want to give you an example from this, because what we do know in the tribulation, there's going to be a lot of martyrs. There will be Jewish martyrs. The 144,000 are going to be slain, but there's also going to be a vast number of people who speak all languages from all nations in chapter 7. And notice what it said there. It says they wore white robes, these martyred saints crying from under the altar. And if you look in chapter 7, and this shows you in verse 9 and following, we won't read this whole thing, but verse 9 and following, it says that before the throne, there were these with clothed in white robes. That's Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, palms, and they're saying salvation. And then John says, who are these? And verse 14, if you look at verse 14, he says, these are they which came out of great tribulation. So they were martyred during the tribulation. Oh, yeah. 5 is martyrdom. Yeah, thank you, Liz. Okay, so I'm simply saying that the major features of the tribulation are outlined in chapter 6, and other details are given to us in other passages in Revelation. So here's martyrdom, and we see this, and I ask Maureen now to read Matthew chapter 24. If you could read those verses, Maureen, and just let people know those verses. Matthew 24, beginning at verse 9.
Matthew 24:9. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. 24:15-17. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house.
Okay, thank you so much, Maureen. So that just shows you there's going to be martyrs and there's going to be persecution. And Revelation chapter 12 tells us about the persecution of Israel. This tells us that there's martyrs and they will be killed. And that word killed is specifically used in Matthew 24 and verse number 7 or 9. And also in chapter 24:15, he says, when you shall see the abomination of desolation. Now, when does that happen in the course of the 7-year tribulation? That's in the middle. That's right at the 3.5-year point. And so Matthew 24, and I'm emphasizing that to say Matthew 24 definitely is an overview of the whole tribulation, because this is the middle, and then it goes on. The persecution gets worse, and then the beginning of sorrows turns into Matthew 24, verse 21, into the great tribulation. So now we're coming to this final seal, the seal of martyrdom, and then the seal of desperation. And so look in Revelation and chapter number 6, and let me just read this. It says, and I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake. Now, you might want to underline great earthquake. We're going to look at that in just a moment. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair. The moon became as blood. Now, this is leading me to think this is at the end of the tribulation, based on Matthew 24, and we'll read those verses. The stars of heaven fell to the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she's shaken of a mighty wind. The heavens departed as a scroll, which is rolled together. Every mountain and island were moved out of their place. So the heaven parts. Who's going to come through the parting of the heavens? Jesus, but we're not going to see him yet, but it's almost like he's going to come, but whoa, he doesn't come. So the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the chief captains, the mighty men, every bondman, every free man hid themselves, the dens, the rocks, the mountains, and they cried out. They said to the mountains, the rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb. The great day of his wrath is come. Who shall be able to stand? What's the great day of his wrath? That's when he comes with a sword out of his mouth. So I believe this brings us right to the brink of the coming of Christ. Now, it says there was a great earthquake. We'll look at that in a moment, but it says the sun became black, and it says the moon became as blood. So go to the passage in Matthew 24. And Sister Carrie, could you please read Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 and 30?
Sure, Pastor. Matthew 24, 29 and 30 reads, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken.
You're not coming through clearly there, Carrie.
I'm not, I'm sorry.
Okay, now I can. Yes, stay
Okay.
back. There you are.
All right. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory.
Okay, so we see the clouds. Whereas the heaven departed in Revelation 6, we see the clouds. We see that the sun will be darkened, which is similar, not the exact same language, but the sun darkened, that the sun became black. I see that the same thing. And it says, and the moon shall not give her light. The moon became as blood. And so I see this, the sun and the moon is definitely referenced, the heaven is definitely referenced in both passages. And there's great catastrophe, if you will, great desperation on the earth. Okay, now if you look at your notes, and it says catastrophe on the earth, John focuses upon the events right before the coming of Christ in the final verses of Revelation 6. He says there will be a great earthquake. So just want to look at this for a moment. Now this is my interpretation, okay? This is what I believe. And this is a major reason too why I think Revelation 6 is like an overview of the 7-year tribulation, because at the 6th seal, there's a great earthquake. At the 6th trumpet, there's a great earthquake. And at the 7th vial, there's a great earthquake. Now, they could be 3 different earthquakes, but I don't believe so. If you look in Revelation, there's great earthquakes 3 times, and that's the only 3 times. At the 6th seal, the 6th trumpet, and the 7th vial. So I think that's a hint that we're being brought to the brink of the coming of Jesus Christ at the end of the 6th seal, the 6th trumpet, and the 7th vial with this great earthquake. Okay, so here's this great earthquake. And then now I want us to look at these other verses. Go to chapter 11, please. Go to chapter 11. And Micah, could you read chapter 11, verse 13, please?
Same hour was there a great earthquake, but the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to God in them.
Okay, so that was at the 6th trumpet, and then the 7th trumpet sounds, and notice what it says right after that earthquake. The kingdoms, verse 15, Revelation 11:15, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord. So again, I think that's right to the brink of his coming. The kingdoms of this world, Jesus is going to come and take them over, set up his kingdom. But it doesn't happen quite yet, because he's wait, I got to tell you in chapter 12 about Israel and about them being persecuted. I got to tell you in chapter 13 about the Antichrist and the false prophet. I got to tell you in chapter 14, 15, these other details, okay? So then at the end of the 7th vial is another reference to this earthquake. So Revelation 16 and verse 18, and I'll read this. And here it says, I'll read Revelation chapter 16, look at verse 17. And the 7th angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, it is done. And there were voices, thunders, lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And so each time the earthquake is described a little bit differently, different effects that it had, but I don't believe there's any contradiction between any of these descriptions. And I do believe that it's the same earthquake. And so that helps me interpret the book of Revelation and the tribulation time. That's like to me, it's like a important clue, if you will. And the last blank there is the convulsions in the sky. He says the sun and the moon will be changed. Jesus refers to this in Matthew 24. So I guess I'm done. Thank you for your patience. I hope it was interesting. But how can you look at Revelation 6 and say that it doesn't bring you right to the brink of the second coming? How could you look at Revelation 6 and say this is just the first part of the tribulation? I just don't look at it that way. And for those reasons. So that helps me in my understanding of the book of Revelation. Any questions tonight? Yes, Liz?
Pharmacia, what is the reference, Liz, that you said for that?
Oh, pharmakia? Yeah. Okay, there's a couple. The question is, where's the word pharmakia used? And it's used in chapter 9 in verse number 21. And there it's translated sorcery in our King James Bible there, where it says they repented not. And it's interesting, they repented not of their murder nor of their sorceries. Now, I always looked at that as street drugs, and it could well be street drugs and cartels. You know, they're not going to repent no matter what. They're going to keep trying to steal their drugs. But, you know, people in power were really, can I say, unrepentant about the vaccine. And they're going to keep trying to push the vaccine on everybody because they get rich off it. But the key verse here is Revelation 18, verse 23, Liz. And that's where it talks about the rich men of the earth, the merchants, which were the great men of the earth. Those are the people like Bezos, like Elon Musk, like Zuckerberg, you know, who like Bill Gates, you know, the rich men of the earth who are like, their names are as commonly and well known as the kings of the earth. And they're making money on pharmakia. It seems, Revelation 18:23. Okay? Yeah. I have a message on this, but it got taken off of YouTube. But we're going to talk about AI next time. And singularity being reached by the Antichrist. Okay, so we'll stop right there if you have no more questions. And God bless you all.